The rain had just begun when Daniel's old car rolled to a stop on the forgotten country road. He cursed under his breath, twisting the key in the ignition again. But the engine only groaned before falling silent. The headlights flickered and then died, leaving him swallowed by the gray twilight. He stepped out, the wet gravel crunching under his boots, and looked around. The horizon stretched endlessly, fields, hills, and a distant forest, but not a single sign of life. Pulling his jacket tighter, he noticed a crooked wooden post a few meters ahead. It was weathered, almost eaten away by time, but at its top clung a rusted metal plate. Welcome to Greystone. The letters were faded, some nearly erased by rust, but still legible enough to chill him. He had never heard of such a town, and it wasn't on any map he remembered. With no reception on his phone and no passing cars, Daniel decided to walk toward the dark line of the forest, where a faint glow shimmered between the trees. The deeper he walked, the quieter the world became. No insects buzzed. No birds sang, only the dull echo of his boots against the dirt. His breath misted in front of him, though the air wasn't cold. The glow resolved itself into a railway signal, standing crookedly among the trees. Its lens pulsed faintly with red light, though no tracks remained beneath it, only rotten ties disappearing into soil and moss. He felt as though the light were watching him, beating slowly like the pulse of a living thing. A branch snapped behind him. He turned, heart thundering, but there was nothing, only shadows between the trunks. Then he heard it, a whisper, soft and rasping, like the drag of sand across stone. The sound grew louder, circling him, though no one was there. He backed away, stumbling, until his hand brushed cold steel. He turned again and realized the signal now loomed directly behind him, impossibly closer than before, its crimson eye blazing brighter. The soil beneath his feet was damp, and he swore he could feel it sinking, as though the ground itself wished to swallow him whole. From the corner of his vision, figures appeared, not walking, not stepping, but swaying, gliding. Dozens of them, pale shapes in tattered clothes, their hollow faces turned toward him. Their eyes glowed faintly, as if reflecting the signal's pulse. Daniel bolted. He tore through the trees, lungs burning, branches clawing his face. When he finally burst through the woods, he found himself at the edge of a town square, deserted but intact, Greystone. Its buildings stood silent, their windows black and empty, but he could feel something pressing down on him, like unseen hands clutching his shoulders. And then, faintly, from the railway signal deep in the forest, the red light flared bright enough to stain the horizon, and every dark window of Greystone began to glow in answer. Daniel stood frozen in the square of Greystone, rain dripping from his hair, his chest heaving. The air here felt raw-thick, heavy, as though every breath carried the weight of centuries. The town looked intact yet lifeless, storefronts with cracked glass, homes with curtains still hanging, a church tower looming above it all. But there were no sounds. Not a single echo answered the slap of his boots on wet stone. He called out once, a desperate hello. His voice vanished instantly, swallowed as if the air refused to carry it. No echo returned. It was as though Greystone itself rejected sound. Shivering, he stepped toward the nearest building, a diner with faded red lettering across its awning. Inside, dust coated the counters and booths, but every place was set as if waiting for customers who never arrived. Plates rested with silverware neatly aligned. Coffee cups sat beside long empty carafes. In one corner booth, though, the cup still steamed faintly. Daniel blinked. He touched it and felt warmth. A noise startled him, the faint clink of a spoon against porcelain. He turned sharply. At the counter, a figure sat hunched, its back to him. A thin hand lifted a spoon and stirred an empty cup, though nothing was inside. The sound was slow, rhythmic, scraping deeper than it should. Daniel whispered, "Who are you?" But the figure didn't move, didn't answer. Its arm just continued the endless circle. He backed away, knocking into a chair, and the figure stilled, slowly to slowly. Its head turned. The face was sunken, skin pale as wax, eyes hollow sockets that reflected no light. Its mouth stretched wide, as though attempting to speak. But the only sound was a rattling exhale that made the window glass shiver. Daniel stumbled outside, heart hammering. But Greystone Square no longer looked the same. Shadows twisted across the buildings. Windows weren't just dark anymore. They gleamed with faint faces, pressed against the glass. Dozens of them, watching silently. Their mouths moved in unison, as if chanting, though still, no sound came. Only the sensation of pressure on his skull, as if words too deep for a human ears pressed into his mind. He staggered backward, colliding with the church steps. Above him, the bell tower loomed. For a second, he thought he saw a pale hand grip the bell's edge, followed by another, then another. Shapes were crawling along the walls, descending toward him. He bolted again, cutting into a side street. But the cobblestones beneath his feet shifted like water, sinking, pulling him closer to the ground. When he finally broke free, he found himself before a grand building Greystone's town hall. Its doors stood open, dark inside. A faint glow pulsed within, the same crimson light as the railway signal in the forest. And as he stared, every window in the town simultaneously flickered with that same pulse, answering it in a terrible rhythm. He realized then, Greystone wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. Daniel hesitated at the entrance of Greystone's town hall. The heavy oak doors yawned open like the jaws of some colossal beast. Inside, the glow deepened, painting the cracked marble floor in pulsating shades of crimson. He stepped across the threshold, and the air immediately grew colder, his breath visible in shallow clouds. The hall was vast, lined with portraits of stern-faced mayors and councilmen whose eyes seemed to follow him. But each face on the canvas was smeared, distorted as though the paint itself had melted. He passed beneath a chandelier that dangled precariously, its crystals vibrating without a sound. No echoes reached him here either, just that suffocating silence pressing on his skull. At the far end of the hall, a dais rose with a long wooden table set for a council meeting. Papers lay scattered, ink frozen mid-stroke on yellowed pages. Chairs overturned as if abandoned mid-deliberation. Yet in the center of the table sat a sealed ledger, its leather cover cracked with age. It pulsed faintly in rhythm with the crimson light. Daniel approached. His hand shook as he opened it. The pages were filled with names, hundreds of them written in careful, slanting script. Each name was followed by a date, stretching back more than a century. The last page chilled him most. The ink was fresh, still glistening, and the most recent name scrawled across it was his own, Daniel Harper. He staggered back, knocking a chair over. It clattered across the marble, but made no sound. A scraping filled the chamber then, not from his movement, but from the walls themselves. The portraits shifted, the smeared faces pulling into grotesque smiles. Slowly, every mouth stretched open, wider and wider, until each painting was a black void. From them poured shapes then, skeletal hands clawing free, reaching into the hole. Daniel bolted for the doors, but they slammed shut with a force that shook the ground. A dozen ghostly councilmen now stood between him and escape, their suits threadbare, their faces half-rotted, their eyes blank, but glowing faintly with red. Their lips moved, but he still heard nothing only the suffocating silence that now throbbed inside his head like a heartbeat. One stepped forward, skeletal fingers pointing at him, and in his skull a voice erupted. "You have been chosen." The others joined in, their soundless chant growing unbearable, vibrating his teeth, his bones, his very thoughts. He dropped to his knees, clutching his head, and when he opened his eyes again, he was no longer in the hall. He was standing in the middle of the church he had seen earlier, the pulpit looming, candles burning though no hand had lit them. Behind him, the heavy doors closed with a final thud. Daniel's knees trembled as he stood within the church. The wooden pews stretched in uneven rows, their surfaces blackened as though scorched by fire. Though no ash lay upon them, the smell of smoke lingered faintly, mixed with the acrid stain of rust. Above the altar hung a massive wooden cross, splintered, its figure absent. Instead, ropes dangled from it, frayed and swaying as though something had only recently been cut free. The candles lining the pulpit flickered though no flame touched them. Their light glowed cold and pale, like bone. Daniel's footsteps echoed here, unlike in the town square, though each sound seemed muffled, as if heard through thick cloth. He approached the altar, compelled by a force he could neither resist nor understand. Behind the pulpit lay a great mural. The paint was cracked, the colors faded, but the image was unmistakable. Townsfolk kneeling before the railway signal in the forest. Their heads were bowed, but their eyes, every single one, were turned outward, staring directly at whoever looked at the painting. Daniel's stomach knotted as he realized they're painted. Eyes tracked him across the room. He turned sharply when the organ at the churches re-groaned. Its pipes exhaled a breathy note, though no one sat at the keys. Slowly, the sound grew louder, filling the chamber with a hollow hymn. The pews began to creak. Daniel's heart raced as the figures seated there straightened. One by one, townsfolk materialized in the pew's phantoms in burned clothing, their faces veiled in ash. They did not move like living things. They uncoiled, their limbs to long, their heads jerking as if pulled by invisible strings. The hymn swelled, rattling the stained glass until cracks split across the colored panes. The altar shook, the ropes dangling from the cross right, coiling into shapes like serpents. They twisted and descended, slithering toward him. Daniel backed away, but his heel struck the first step of the pulpit, and he fell hard. From the ropes, a figure dropped, a chop, eyeless corpse, its jaw distended. It rose, towering, its burnt skin flaking like paper. Daniel scrambled to his feet as the pews erupted, the phantom congregation standing in unison, their hollow mouths opened, and this time sound did come, an ear-splitting shriek that seemed to tear at the wood and stone. The candles burst, spraying sparks. The mural on the wall bled, its paint dripping thick and black. He ran down the aisle, pushing through the doors as the shriek followed him into the night. Outside, the town lay shrouded in thicker fog, the crimson glow stronger than ever. But the church bells began to toll, though no one was in the tower. Each strike rattled through the ground, summoning movement in the mist. Dozens of shapes gathered at the edge of the square, watching him with eyes like smoldering coals. Daniel stumbled from the church into the square, clutching his chest as the tolling bells thundered above. The fog thickened so rapidly that the buildings blurred, their outlines dissolving into shadows. Only the crimson glow remained clear, pulsing stronger than before, bathing the entire town in a sickly, blood-red haze. The shapes he had glimpsed at the edges of the mist now stepped forward. Figures, dozens of them, then hundreds. They wore the clothing of many eras' Victorian coats, tattered uniforms, dresses that looked centuries old frayed, burnt or rotting. Their faces were pale, hollow, many without eyes, others with mouths stitched shut. They surrounded him, closing the circle with silent precision. Daniel's breath hitched. He tried to shout, to break the silence, but his voice faltered, barely escaping his throat. Still, the figures halted at once, their heads tilting in unison, as though listening. Then, in the distance, a low rumble rolled across the earth, like thunder underground. The cobblestones at his feet cracked. From beneath them, black veins of smoke seeped upward, curling and twisting into skeletal hands. The entire square trembled. A fissure split the ground, widening slowly, and through it Daniel saw not soil, but a churning void, endless and hungry. The phantom townsfolk raised their arms together, Ponce turned toward the sky. The fog swirled around Daniel, pulling him closer to the fissure. He dug his heels into the cobblestones, but the ground itself seemed to shift, pushing him forward. The circle of figures tightened, their mouths open, not shrieking this time, but humming, a deep vibration that made his bones ache. Above, the church bell tower flared crimson. From the shattered windows, streams of red light shot upward into the sky. The railway signal deep in the forest answered, glowing so bright that even here its pulse seared through the mist. The two lights connected, forming a column that stretched beyond the clouds, tearing at the heavens themselves. Daniel's vision blurred. His name burned in his mind again, echoing from the ledger he had seen in the town hall. Chosen, sacrificed, bound. He staggered, falling to his knees at the edge of the fissure. The void below reached for him, the black smoke forming arms that clawed at his body, pulling him closer. But as he slipped forward, another figure appeared, a woman in the crowd, and like the others, her eyes were whole, her face not rotted but sorrowful. She shook her head, raising one hand as though warning him. Daniel froze, his heart hammering. The rest of the townsfolk lowered their heads in unison, their chanting hum now rising into a scream. The ground split wide, the void yawned open, and a woman's hand reached out toward him. The woman's hand felt cold as Daniel grasped it. In that instant, the folk seemed to still. The screaming townsfolk froze in mid-chant. Her eyes locked onto his, and for a fleeting moment, he saw something human: remorse, sorrow, perhaps even love. But her lips moved with urgency, forming words he could not hear. The fissure roared beneath them, widening as molten light spilled upward. The townsfolk shrieked again, their stitched mouths tearing open as black ichor spilled down their chins. The church bell tolled once more, splitting the night sky, and the crimson beam linking Greystone to the forest signal fled, so bright it seared Daniel's vision. The woman pulled him toward her, away from the cousin. "Why me?" he screamed, though his own voice sounded faint, as if muffled underwater. She shook her head violently and pointed toward the horizon. Through the mist, Daniel saw the forest rail signal. It no longer stood alone, it had multiplied. Dozens of them now pulsed across the landscape, spreading outward in all directions, connecting town to town like a spider's web of blood-red light. Greystone was not unique. It was only the beginning. The townsfolk advanced again, their arms outstretched, their eyes glowing with the signal's light. The woman shoved Daniel backward, her mouth forming one final word he could almost hear: run. He staggered, turning, pushing through the mist as the fissure collapsed behind him, consuming the square in a thunderous roar. The crimson lights pulsed in unison, shaking the ground. The phantom congregation wailed, and the woman's face was lost among them, her form swallowed by the crowd. Daniel ran through the streets, past the diner, the hall, the church now collapsing inward as if devoured from within. The mist closed around him, yet somehow he reached the forest's edge. The railway signal loomed there, larger now, its red eye blazing. He fell to his knees before it, gasping. Then it blinked, once, twice like a heartbeat. The ground split open again, and the forest filled with pale, reaching hands. Behind him, Greystone vanished in a final flare of red light. All that remained was the signal, pulsing, spreading, summoning. Daniel's scream echoed at last, but not in his voice. It joined theirs, the countless voices trapped within the light, crying out across the endless dark, and far beyond the horizon. In town still untouched, other signals flickered to life, one by one.